right-to-work states, unions still have to provide the representation, but workers are not required to pay a fair share fee for the representation. That creates the free rider problem that weakens unions.
We have segments every now and then that for some may be repetitive and elementary, but for others, other people are just coming into this stuff as a beginner, and they haven't heard these conversations, or maybe they haven't heard them in the same way, and so it's worth coming back to some of these conversations every now and then. And one of those conversations is about right to work, because it really is one of those things that was named so well, even though it is not at all descriptive of what it does. And so, Adam, talk to us about right to work. I mean, in what ways is it misleading? In what ways is the name of the policy misleading? And what does it actually do?
Yeah, so, I mean, right to work is a misleading term. It does not actually have anything to do with a person's right to a job. Right to work sounds pretty good. It almost sounds like a job guarantee, right? If I have a right to work, I assume y'all gonna put me to work somewhere, right? That's right. What I would assume, but of course, that's not what right to work means. Right to work refers to state laws that prohibit unions from receiving quote-unquote fair share fees from workers who are represented by the union and covered by a collective bargaining agreement, but not a member of the union. Okay, so this clarify this. In fair share states, so not right-to-work states, in fair share states, unions and employers can negotiate rules that require all workers covered by a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, to either pay union dues if they want to be a member of the union, or if they don't want to be a member, to pay a fair share fee. And the reason they do that is because it costs. If you're still covered by the contract and you're still represented by the union, you don't have to join, but you're still getting those benefits, right? It's not the same as being a member, but you're still getting some representation and coverage from the contract. You benefit from the work of the union. It is only fair to pay a fair share. At least that's the way I see it. It seems pretty reasonable, so that you don't have people who are taking a free ride on the union's dime. And unfortunately, that's what we have in right-to-work states. That's what they like here in right-to-work states. The politicians think that workers should get to take a free ride on the union's hard work, that you should be able to receive representation from the union, that you should benefit from a collective bargaining agreement contract from the union, but you shouldn't have to compensate the union in exchange in any way or form. So in right-to-work states, the fair share agreements are illegal. Okay, that's what right-to-work ultimately means. It means that fair share agreements are illegal. And just, again, to emphasize, the fair share agreements are negotiated between employers and unions. Okay, it's not the government that steps in and says, oh, you must pay a fair share fee. No, it's something that is negotiated in a contract. Unions and employers have give and take in the contract negotiation process, and naturally unions would like to see fair share fees where it's permissible because it makes sense. But again, in right-to-work states, the fair share agreements, they're illegal. In all states, unions are required by law to represent all workers covered by a collective bargaining agreement, regardless of whether the worker is a member of the union. Okay? So in right-to-work states, unions still have to provide the representation, but workers are not required to pay a fair share fee for the representation. That creates the free rider problem that weakens unions.
And so with that, I mean, that obviously creates, the weakened unions make it makes it more difficult for unions to function. And so with that, we do see that states with with right to work laws generally have lower rates of unionization.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, the 17 states with the lowest union density rates, they all have right to work laws. And so, these low union density states typically have what else? Lower wages, less robust public benefits. So, it is all connected. It's not a coincidence that right to work states have lower rates of unionization, and it's not a coincidence that states with less unions are worse on pretty much any measurement, right? Mm-hmm. For working people, at least. It's worse in terms of wages, and it's worse in terms of the state, the quality of life and the public benefits provided in the state. And so that's what right to work means. It's not about a right to a job. It's not about freedom. It has nothing to do with freedom. It is a tactic by the employer and the government in collusion with one another to weaken unions, to require unions to take care of people who do not have to pay any sort of compensation in exchange. Right. And, nowhere else do employers think that's a good philosophy, that you should get to take a free ride, right? Employers don't like that. At least that's not what they claim, okay? So, in most scenarios in our society, if you receive a benefit, a service of some kind, you have to exchange something, right? You have to provide compensation. You have to provide your own service in exchange, whatever it may be. So it is a very unique situation that unions are subjected to, where they have all the obligations but none of the benefits of these workers who choose not to join. And I'm saying all this not to demonize the workers who choose not to join. That's their choice, of course. It's a choice whether or not you want to join the union. But I think a fair share fee is a totally reasonable thing to negotiate in a contract. And it's totally reasonable that employers and unions should be able to negotiate that in their contracts if they so choose, if that's what's ratified by both sides of the negotiation. It's big government getting in the way of these negotiations through right to work. And there's a lot more we could say there about right to work and its racist legacy and the way it's been connected to, white supremacy in the South in particular. Again, it's no coincidence that the South, by and large, is right to work. And the anti-union campaigns of old were very, very racially tinged, to put it mildly. So, there's a lot of connections there between the legacy of racism and right-to-work laws. And one other aspect of this discussion is that right-to-work is often considered something else. Right-to-work and at-will employment are two different concepts. Okay, but a lot of times people will say right to work as if it means the same thing as at-will employment. And it is actually two different things. So at-will employment means an employee can be fired for any legal reason and does not have to be given a reason or a warning. Unions fight for due process, right? We fight against at-will employment. And typically in union contracts, you may have a probationary period, some months, some years, where you work and you are at will during that time, to at least maybe largely at will. You may have some rights in that period, but then you get due process after the probationary period, or you get tenure, maybe if you're a teacher. And all that means is due process. That means you can still be fired, but the employer has to have a good reason for it. Right. They have to have just cause. And there are a variety of different things that could get you fired and that are considered to be just cause. Right? So an employee who is always late to work, an employee who's drunk at work, those things, due process aside, if the employer can prove it, okay, they can do what they're allowed to do within the contract, within the rules agreed upon by both sides for employee discipline. So at-will employment is the default. Right. It's the default here in the South. It's, it's
the default everywhere in the country, is my understanding, except for like Montana.
Right. So at-will employment is the default option. That's why unions are so important in the workplace, so that you can move beyond at will and actually have a little bit of security and know that your boss can't just fire you at a whim, but would actually have to make a case for why you deserve to be fired, would actually have to give you some notification in advance, that there's a process to move through to get rid of you. Because I can tell you, having represented workers in both statuses, it is so much better for the worker that they have due process. The at-will employment is very, very harmful to employees. But I wanted to put that out there because a lot of times people use at-will and right-to-work as if they're the same thing, and kind of interchange those terms. And, I've heard it plenty of times said, oh, well, yeah, this is Alabama, it's right-to-work. They can fire you for anything. And you're right. You're half right. They can fire you for anything, but it's not because it's right to work necessarily, though. On a deeper level, yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right? Because we are an anti-union state, we have weak laws to protect workers. So there is some truth to that statement, but that's, typically not what people mean. People are confusing at-will employment with right to work. But at-will employment is very, very, arbitrary. And I have personally, represented workers who were at will and who were, fired for stupid reasons and in some cases for no reason whatsoever. People who were loyal employees, who did a good job, who had great evaluations, who show up to work on a Friday, and next thing you know, security is walking them to their car. All right. And never told why, ever. Never. The only chance they may have to find out why is if they file an EEOC claim, right? Because the law does say any legal reason.
Right.
It's still against the law to discriminate against people. You cannot fire someone because of a protected category in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, right? So an employer is not supposed to fire someone because of their race or their gender or their religion or ethnicity or disability status or age over 40. Those are protected categories, but again, in a at-will employment state, if that's the default, good luck proving that. Right. We may know, like the worker may know they were fired for discriminatory reasons. The union rep may know they're fired for discriminatory reasons. Any common sense person may know someone's fired for discriminatory reasons, but that doesn't mean you can prove it, especially proving it in front of a reactionary judge in a state like Alabama. That is right to work, that is anti-union, and that is anti-worker in its legal framework. So, that's right to work, that's at-will employment.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.